Welcome to the Liberty UA channel. Today we have Yelisevich with us, a businessman who actively runs a political blog. I encourage you to subscribe to his channel, and please also subscribe to Liberty UA, give us likes and leave us comments. Denis, greetings to you.
Right away, I would like to ask you if you think that the operation Trump launched against Iran was his mistake.
So, did he make a mistake or did he do everything right? And will the results and the goals he set for himself be achieved?
The goals will be achieved no matter what. There is no mistake in this. You know, I want to tell you, I'm honestly shocked by the reaction of so many people in Ukrainian society, both public figures and ordinary people. I see what so-called ordinary people post on social media. There's a total lack of understanding underlying aggression, distrust from some people, and hatred toward the United States and Israel. I don't know what causes this. Everything has just begun. Everything is only starting. There is already essentially a coalition against Iran, a whole coalition made up of other Arab countries, of respectable Arab countries that want to live like normal people. But Iran wants to keep hanging people in the streets and to bomb and to sell to Putin and to sell him technologies and drones that bomb Ukraine, and then the Ukrainians come out. And they ask, what are you doing there, over there? Why? And over there they hit a school, a military school, a military school. I'm not saying that anyone should be killed anywhere, but war is a cruel thing. In Ukraine, they also hit anywhere, and we haven't always hit where we were supposed to. You see, it's better not to let things get to war at all, but when savages want to produce nuclear weapons for themselves, I'll say it again, they hang people in the streets and someone says that's normal, why are you bothering them? These are people who don't understand anything at all.
On the other hand, we've heard Trump's calls for people to become more active, people in Iran that they can become more active. Now, the time has come when they can to change their government if they choose, but we haven't seen that response from the people. There were a few videos on TikTok where people were dancing, they were happy as if this regime had been overthrown. But this isn't a widespread phenomenon, maybe people didn't expect it. This kind of help, what do you think?
There was a kind of disconnect when people took to the streets. Neither the authorities nor the US intelligence services expected it. A couple of months ago, you remember, when there were mass protests, during those protests, tens of thousands of people were killed, tens of thousands of people. If a dissident leaves Iran, let's say he disagrees with the government, with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, he leaves, but his family stays behind and his family is repressed. By the way, Zelensky has taken this path as well. It's true, no one is being killed yet. That's why people are intimidated. And now, when the military operation has started, Trump says, people go out into the streets, everything depends on you. It's frightening when tens of thousands have already been killed. We've discussed this many times on air about Russia and Ukraine. The regime suppresses people so much that when it reaches a certain point, you can hardly do anything anymore. And you have to understand there are Mossad agents in Iran, there are CIA agents in Iran, there's huge funding there. And even with all that, we still don't see anything happening. Very strong unrest may still be ahead. I think something will happen, but I don't know to what extent. Trump is already saying today that a ground operation is possible, and that's a very serious thing. You see, now we have to go all the way. But those Arab countries have suffered. They're already calling Trump today and saying, let's resolve this diplomatically. Gas and energy prices are rising. There's a blockade, you know, of those tankers. That's the law now. And you see, that's how it always is. So sometimes we need to defeat some tyrants so that common sense can prevail. But then the economy reacts immediately, the domino effect starts, a chain of dissatisfied people, and it affects people's lives. Everything is very complicated. Once again, by the way, it's worth telling people that everything is very complicated. As innovations increase and global economic integration grows, everyone becomes more interconnected, making things more complex. That's the insurance. Notice, this is a clear example right now, and the reason I'm explaining it to you in such detail is because it's an object lesson from the war. So imagine, they're already putting pressure, telling us to wrap things up faster. Because it's not profitable to wage war. You see, those who trade, the countries that are focused on creation, on the economy, it's not profitable for them to go to war. It's profitable for Putin to wage war, and it's profitable for Zelensky to wage war. Putin has only a raw materials economy. No services, no goods, nothing is produced, nothing is needed. It's only state capitalism, and Zelensky is only state capitalism as well. Give it to me, I'll go to war. And as for Ukraine, let it somehow struggle on its own. I strongly advise people to think hard about this example and watch closely.
The Iranians are not inclined toward peace either. They say they will take revenge for their spiritual leader and have raised a red flag. And that's why there's talk that this war could drag on for some time. I watch analysts on different channels, seeing what everyone is saying.
And they say that the most beneficial thing for Trump right now would be to sit down at the negotiating table. And it would be best if he managed to agree on what he initially intended to achieve.
As for oil, that's what they're saying anyway. The Iranians say they don't want to produce nuclear weapons, they're giving them up, and they'll only use nuclear technology for civilian purposes. They're even ready to let the IAEA monitor them.
They stated this even before Trump's intervention.
What do you think Trump should walk away with from the negotiating table?
There's also the issue of long-range missiles. They want to keep developing ballistic missiles that can reach countries they shouldn't be able to reach. So it's not just about striking neighboring Arab countries. They can strike much farther. This is a regime that's set on confrontation in that region. There's never any peace as long as there are people like that. Besides, don't forget, it's not just a matter for the US, it's also a matter for Israel. This is an officially approved state ideology of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. So everything is very complicated and there are huge interests involved. Some of these interests overlap completely, some only partially, and with some, they don't overlap at all. So let's see how things turn out. I'll tell you even more. Right now, there's a military operation against Iran. I think it will last throughout March, no matter what, the whole month of March. And basically, I can tell you that Cuba was planned for the second half of March. There won't be any military intervention in Cuba since there's nothing to shoot at. So will the US take full economic control instead? And this was planned for March. I don't know how current events will adjust these plans. Maybe it will be postponed to April, but I don't rule out parallel processes. So when Iran is already heading for the final stretch, maybe Cuba will be as well. You see, that's all. I'm answering your question. Everything goes far beyond just Iran. There's a whole chain. Iran funds terrorist groups around the world, Hezbollah and others. You see, it's a global breeding ground for evil, and the task is to squash it with a slipper, to return Iran to a normal state the way it used to be. Before 1979, before 1978, before the Islamic Revolution, when it was a pro-Western country, when women felt comfortable there, not like now when they are not valued at all. When people weren't being hanged, when it was a secular state, in short, these people want a medieval regime, you understand? Medieval traditions, you know, basically Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, they're all the same, all part of the same chain, and Trump is gradually cutting out this filth one by one. In January, it was Maduro. In February, it was Ayatollah Khamenei who was killed. And maybe in March, it will be Cuba. And this is not the end yet. You see, Tatiana, it's not just Iran. It's a huge chain, not just a series of events. It's one chain that works together. We can't look at Venezuela and Cuba separately. They're actually all links in the same chain.
And what if these assistants, so to speak, or colleagues like Iran's good partners get involved in helping, like China, for example?
If we assume the situation where the Americans take the land route, if they're ready for it, because that's still a question, will China get involved in helping Iran?
That's the point. Why did I say the operation will likely last until the end of March, but probably not longer? In April, there should be a meeting between Trump and Xi Jinping, you see. And if things go the way they are, this meeting might not happen. But both China and the United States need this meeting to take place. I don't believe that China will get fully involved. Most likely, the maximum that could happen is something like what they're doing with Russia, supplying components for drones, all that stuff, maybe some ammunition. But that's a huge risk for Xi Jinping. It's a huge risk for Xi Jinping. And it's similar to what's happening in Iran right now. I just spent 2 minutes telling you about this chain. This is also pressure on China, you understand? Because all these countries are actually under the influence of China first and Russia second. And Trump doesn't hit China directly, well, only hit a little with tariffs, but he doesn't hit Russia directly either. The sanctions that were introduced are just being extended, that's all. Well, he scared off the tankers regarding the tankers and he hit BRICS. But globally, Trump is pushing out these partners. He's pushing out these partners and showing them his strength. What are you going to do to us? What can you do to us? And you see, China just made a statement there, but in fact, they didn't actually get involved. It's a political game, and if you noticed, Putin isn't doing anything.
They only urge that if you have any misunderstandings with a neighboring country or another country, you need to look for diplomatic solutions.
These were representatives of Russia who said that, Peskov, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, but I mean, they don't provide direct support to Iran. I mean, that's real power. When some people were telling us about Putin, well, you know who I'm talking about, Putin, so what about Putin? What about Xi Jinping? Yes, Xi Jinping has a big economy, no one argues with that. China is an important country for manufacturing worldwide, for supply chains, for the economy. But when the time comes and it's about power, they just stand and watch, and they can't do anything against the United States.
What is being offered to Americans now as a bonus to the people, to the nation, is that Trump tells them they are a nuclear threat to us. If it comes to a ground operation, we need to gather our strength and go storm them because they will pose a threat to us, or that we need their oil. We will get rich this way. How do you motivate people?
It's not like in Ukraine where men are caught on the streets and sent to the front, and the media are told to be quiet and say only this. It's different.
How will Trump explain this and motivate Americans to take these actions?
In America, many people don't support military operations and criticize them. I don't like their arguments, but I'm glad when there is such democracy. When you can say on television that you don't like what the president is doing, you don't like this or that. You said it right about the army. It's not like that here. It's a professional contract army. These are professionals with high salaries, well-trained, who will go. Military tasks will have to be solved, and the life of each such professional is worth its weight in gold. No one will be abandoned. So people here basically know very well what this world that Iran represents is like. Well, as I call them, savages, this is aggression. These are people who basically tried some sabotage. You remember in America, they actually managed to do it. So this is a threat to Western civilization. Let me put it that way. A threat to Western civilization. Basically, everyone understands this. And the question is not whether to leave Iran alone, but rather how and what to do with them. You understand they don't want any casualties on the US side because in war people die anyway, but here they really don't want that, unlike how it is with us. Let's all go to the front and die quickly. Here it's the opposite. They understand that Western civilization needs to be saved, but let's do it with minimal casualties. Those are basically all the arguments. We should remember how Obama gave $1.8 trillion to this regime, and Obama and Biden unfroze $8 billion for them. You see, but Trump went to war against them. That's what people need to think about. Why is it like that? Why did those presidents help this regime and now Trump is cutting them off? Well, let's see. Let's wait a week or two.
The Democrats are using it, so what do you think the Democrats will do now in Congress? How will it be? All this information has been submitted, and by the way, has Congress responded in any way?
Because their job is to protect the Constitution, their main law. We have our Constitution and they have their own law.
And so the task of Congress is not so much to protect people or their rights, but to protect the main law of their country, the country. Why didn't this Congress intervene in any way? Or on the contrary, why were they in favor when Trump decided to take action against Iran, but now their opinions have changed?
How would you assess their ideas? Are they uniform, diverse? What will they lead to?
That's why last time when you asked about the arguments, about what arguments those dissatisfied with the war have, I gave you such a general answer because we still don't have access to all the information. So last week there was a meeting, I don't remember what it's called. Well, let's just say it was secret. There was a representative of the Democrats there, one of the most prominent Democrats, Chuck Schumer, and he came out with wide eyes after that meeting about Iran, and he didn't say anything against Trump anymore. He admitted that we were faced with something unbelievable, so there really is something going on. And so, well, let me tell you this. A lot is really at stake for Trump with the midterm elections coming up. So a lot is at stake for Trump in Iran. That is, whether the Democrats will be able to speak out depends on this operation. But look, if he messes up, they'll say, look what he did, or maybe they won't be able to, or he'll shut them up completely and irreversibly. And that's why I believe in success, because for Trump, there's really a lot at stake in this operation, including politically.
And if he doesn't succeed, well, if we consider that possibility, then these Democrats, so to speak, will rub his nose in it. You failed. This didn't work out. Will the right-wing forces across Europe and the world thrive, or will the Democrats and globalists prevail then?
No, that's not all. Iran matters, but not everything depends on it. Much does, but not all. And no matter how successfully it goes, the Democrats still won't come out and say, well, look how great Trump is, vote for him. They'll be looking for something there, but with midterm elections coming up in the fall, there will be many reasons to both praise and criticize Trump. In American politics, this will happen too, just like elsewhere before elections, especially now. Well, we've talked about this now. There's no point in going into such detail. Let's wait a bit, at least 2 or 3 weeks. In 2 or 3 weeks, we'll talk about it.
You're wondering how this will affect Ukraine? How will negotiations in Ukraine happen? We're not concerned. They won't be in Abu Dhabi. They could take place in Switzerland or elsewhere.
Will they happen at all? And is Zelensky ready for peace negotiations?
If we take into account this latest interview with Budanov, it seems there is a growing understanding that these negotiations are needed and that peace is needed. But things just aren't falling into place, so to speak.
First of all, I want to tell you for sure, at least as of this moment while we're talking, no one has canceled the peace negotiations, and several new locations are being considered. Of course, they won't be held in the Arab region anymore. It's more likely everything will be in Europe, possibly even Istanbul. And I believe that the negotiations will take place, maybe not this week, maybe next week, but the negotiations have not been disrupted. How does it affect things? Air defense missiles are needed in that region. Ukraine wasn't really given many anyway, so it's having an impact. Zelensky woke up and said, I can send you the best specialists in shooting down Shaheds, and in return you make a truce agreement with Putin.
An extension for a month, yes.
A truce, yes, a truce for a month. And now let's think about why he needs this. I'll tell you, they already have a law about elections ready. To rush through the elections quickly and try to cook something up. But I'll repeat, I support this option. Rush the elections, have a quick truce for a month. I'm for all of it because Zelensky will lose anyway.
Thank you, thank you. Is it possible that these elections could be falsified? Because how can internally displaced people, forced migrants, people abroad vote? There could be falsification.
And these elections won't give the result that people are counting on.
There will be falsifications, but I want to tell you once again, no matter what kind of falsifications, electronic voting, whatever he comes up with, he will lose. Still, all the administrative resources, huge amounts of money, all their media power, as they believe they have, are used to silence people as much as possible. He will not win this election, even if he announces the result and says, look, I got more votes than anyone. He will not win this election.
We need to survive economically until these elections because due to this tense situation, Russia is the one who benefits.
If we can say politically they are losing some of their reputation, maybe yes, but they will keep selling oil and their revenues will increase and the price will go up, so they will have money.
Europeans will be left without money, and when Europeans are without money or lose income, we, Ukraine, are completely dependent on them.
What will our financial situation be like?
Yes, no, well, we're already bankrupt. So what are we going to talk about? We're already bankrupt. Hungary is blocking this loan. You see, you're asking me a question. Usually you ask me about things I've at least thought about for myself. I don't really think about how Ukraine will pay its bills tomorrow. Why? Because it's a pointless exercise. Paying for a war just for the sake of war, it's never a matter of existential threat. War for the sake of war for the sake of politics. And paying salaries to officials who are just parasites, who do nothing, and there are so many of them, that's just not interesting to me. Now, if it were about development, about reforms, that would interest me. I advise people not to think about it, just don't think about it. You didn't take on these debts, you didn't manage this, you didn't run it. You need to think about constructive things, about how to end the war, about elections really, and about how Ukraine will continue to live. You know, I'm just sick of all this discussion, basically. I'm not talking about you, I'm speaking in general. I mean, we all keep discussing basically the same thing, and it feels like we've gotten stuck and bogged down in it. And we need to move forward somehow, and that could give us momentum. Only a choice can do that.
We can see that in fact oil prices have already increased by 10 to 15%. In Ukraine, we see that small bills are going out of circulation.
This means that inflation will rise and prices for everything will go up.
We see that first category, first group entrepreneurs are closing down, and if I'm not mistaken, third group entrepreneurs have paid the most taxes, while the first group, on the contrary, is shrinking.
So we can say that there is a genocide of small and micro business owners happening.
Believe me, the second and third groups will also be closing down in 2026. As soon as these increased taxes on sole proprietors are introduced, 20% VAT, all this monitoring stuff. Just the other day, I read that they are planning to consider raising VAT for everyone. Right now, it's 20%, but they want to make it higher. I think they're talking about 23 to 25%. So you see, I always want to explain things to people in simple terms. So if it's a big business, a large enterprise, an oligarch or the state, they can handle any vati. They feed off it, any vati, any taxes. They'll find a way to optimize them. They'll manage. But VAT crushes medium-sized businesses. And for small businesses, VAT is just a nasty tax. Besides being corrupt, it simply kills the service sector by itself, especially the modern service sector. It's when you sit at your computer, do something, create an intellectual product. What kind of VAT is there? You don't have any ingredients except your computer, its components, and your own mind. It's all nasty. It all leads, well, how can I put it? It's all a vicious cycle of events that will still end up in a dead end. And society, unfortunately, you see, just stands there and watches all this. They say, let's ban Telegram. I read the comments and it's just the same thing. We have VPNs and emojis. Wait, so you're fine using a VPN just so they can restrict more? What if they block VPNs tomorrow? Will you just find another way? Don't you want to defend your rights however you can without going to the streets? I always emphasize this. I'm not calling for anything like that. You don't even want to get upset about it. And what about taxes? Taxes. I'll switch to crypto. No, you won't. You won't switch to crypto.
The situation is that we see in the media, we publish information saying that we made it through this winter, that we are unbreakable, we are strong, we made it through this winter. But how, for example, did they not mention the woman who froze in her own apartment? Her neighbor came and said that this woman was like a mammoth in ice in her apartment.
But they say that we are unbreakable, meaning we don't draw any conclusions, because as a society, we are offered these options that we are unbreakable, and for those without heat, that's not a problem.
Why don't people change their approach to reacting to such news, to such publications, to such narratives from the authorities?
Beyond the economy, which is always important to me, the most important parameter of a country is something else. It's about whether a human life has value. In the post-Soviet space, it's considered worthless. I'm talking about the story of the elderly woman you mentioned, and I know what you mean, so it means something. A post came out saying, well, we survived the winter, spring is ahead, so what? Russia, how do you like that? Yanina Sokolova, even Zelensky himself in his evening video address, said the same thing. Do you know how this works? And so it's almost March for us, so let's start with the fact that we've survived the winter. People, take a breath, relax. We showed them, basically, we can keep fighting until October, November, and it's fine, or maybe even fight until October, November of 2027, and that's the narrative that started spreading. I find all of this so disgusting, I really do. And today, Veneslevsky is at it again. We need to block their accounts. We need to deprive them of opportunities, of rights, so they can't even order food for themselves. He's a real fascist, that's what he is, you understand? If you don't want to serve, for example, that's considered breaking the law. Well, that's what the court is for, to decide. Maybe you'll choose to go to prison instead. And the nasty thing is that they deprive you of basic human rights. Driving a car, having a bank account, and accordingly paying for your own food. So basically, we'll force you, Ukrainian man, will deprive you of food, take away your job, take away your freedom, just so you'll go to the front and die. That's it, nothing more. And that's what we discussed today. You said it yourself. That's exactly what was said. That's exactly what he said. A 1-month truce. That's what he wants. He doesn't need peace. He has a plan, a truce, a month. He thinks, I win the elections. I show everyone who's boss and say, guys, I'm legitimate. And as a legitimate president, I declare we'll keep fighting for another 3 years or 2 years. And here the devil is in the details. I urge people to pay attention to such details. What does a month actually mean? Here he's telling Trump, we need peace. We need peace. And now when there's a real opportunity to actually help other countries, which rarely happens, how can we even help other countries at all? He says to talk to Putin about a ceasefire. He follows his own agenda and plan, and the problems of Ukrainians, whether in Ukraine or not, don't really matter to him. Yeah, he doesn't care about any of that. He has his own agenda. And if you don't want to put up with it and be powerful and unbreakable, then you're just a traitor.
The most important thing for people, for Ukrainians, is that it's very important for Ukrainians for this war to end. And people who understand that only Trump promises to end it are rooting for him to be involved in this negotiation process. And if this operation in Iran lowers his ratings and for some political reasons he can no longer actively deal with the war in Ukraine, then Zelensky will endure during all this time while these inconveniences exist, and he will remain our president for another 5 years.
Well, of course. You see, he recently made a statement like only Americans and Russians want elections. They're pushing for elections. Ukrainians don't want elections. Now, I understand that's a bluff. It's just a bluff. That's his way of showing that only you want elections. And then when the situation puts pressure on him, or Putin agrees to a 1-month truce, he wanted 2 months, if you remember recently. Now, basically, a month is fine. Maybe even 2 weeks will do. I doubt Putin will agree to more than 2 weeks, a week-long election truce, or any truce. In general, let him agree to this, and this will allow him to make this clever move. That is, you see, his statements can be one thing for the external audience and another for the internal one. Second, bluffing. Well, I think I'll tell you again, Russians and Americans only want elections, but Ukrainians don't. That's pure bluff, but it's also despicable. He spoke for all Ukrainians. Did you ask anyone? He's not the only one. They come out there and say, Ukrainians don't want this, Ukrainians don't want peace, Ukrainians don't want a territorial compromise. Well, other politicians talk about it too. But did you ask the people who authorized you, who gave you the right to speak on behalf of everyone? Ukraine is a huge country, excuse me, with tens of millions of people. Some clown just comes out and says this.
If you look at the situation in Iran, how is it any better? There's a dictator in power, and Trump wants to help these people.
But if Iran didn't have oil, the kind they have there, and if that oil didn't supply 80% of the Chinese, if they didn't buy that oil, would he have gone into Iran with such an operation? So in Ukraine, we don't really have anything left that would make another country stand up for us like that?
Yes, unfortunately, we've never had anything like that, and we weren't integrated into the global economy. Let's not speculate about whether Trump would have gone or not. It's just pointless.
But without oil, is Iran interesting to Trump or not?
Continuation. So if we look at the issue this way, then we're cutting this piece off from the main thing. People who think like this, I know why you're asking this, are you asking? They write in the comments, he needs Venezuela just for the oil and so on. Okay, let's suppose it's all just for the oil. Let's suppose it's only about the oil. I have a question for the citizens of Ukraine. If America controls Iran's oil, is that better or worse? No, there won't be any on the streets. Trump will finance it. Under Trump, will Iran finance shaheeds flying over Ukraine? No, it won't happen. So are we on the same side of the barricades or not? You understand, right now in the world, and honestly, it's always been this way, you have to choose a side of the barricades. You're either with Western civilization, the real one, not the one they're pushing on us in the European Union right now. Even you've heard Germany and France are basically ready to stand against Iran. Only Spain played dumb and the United Kingdom stalled. But honestly, later on, Starmer, you know, all that, I was actually pleasantly surprised by the behavior of France and Germany. So here you'll have to make a choice. You have to choose everything in this life. No one is saying that Trump is just sitting there while people are being hanged. That's the only reason I would go to war. Yes, it's a whole set of factors, and I told you, and you just said it now, China, Russia, North Korea, let's not forget all of that. It's all one chain. And if you don't fight against this with every available method, then they will win. If Greenland is not under US control, if there are no military bases there, then sooner or later there will be Chinese and Russian military bases. That's just how the world works, you understand? And there are some people sitting there now, some idiots, especially in Spain, are people, I mean, sitting there and they're like, what's he doing? In Greenland, you'll be the first to take the hit, or in Britain, you'll be the first to take the hit. If the US doesn't control this because the US won't fight with Europe and won't attack Ukraine or try to impose its own order, and Russia, well, Russia has already launched drones. You know what China is capable of and what they're preparing for. It's clear they're up to something. Once Trump is no longer president, I believe a military operation against Taiwan will start, unless another Republican wins next. That's why your broadcasts and my broadcasts exist, so that people can understand these things instead of just living in an ideal world. What's he doing there? What's he up to? As a citizen of Ukraine, you have certain interests. You're a civilized person from Western civilization, or maybe you're a baker, or maybe you're just not very basic. You know, I laughed so much. One lady writes in threads, a Ukrainian, you know, like those they call Olya UA, who holds the front in Warsaw, but really wants everyone to go to the front. She writes, there's one thing I can't figure out. Why doesn't Iran bomb America, but bombs other Arab countries? So she understands the map, right? That basically there's 4,000 kilometers separating them and nothing will actually reach there. Well, you see, that's the kind of understanding people have, and that's how they come to their conclusions.
So, this girl is also writing about security guarantees. How can we ask Trump for security guarantees now if they can't even ensure their own security?
But I ask whether this question is based on the fact that we can't rely on Trump's moral and decent values, and that's what we shouldn't count on. He is the person he is for his country, for his voters who elected him. As a country, we have nothing to offer him.
Except for our people who are proactive and creative, maybe it would be beneficial for him to build economic relations with us. Maybe that's something we can hold on to as a hope to end this war and survive as a country.
We have a signed deal on resources. We have a signed deal on resources. By the way, are you doing that right now? I was thinking about my own thing, and I said 4,000 kilometers. No, that's between Ukraine and Iran. There was another story too. People started writing that Iran might bomb Ukraine. No, the distance between Iran and the US is twice as much, probably about 8 to 10,000. Now, to your question, we signed a deal regarding minerals. That's the first thing, and the second. There has never been capitalism in Ukraine. Ukraine is a huge country. White Christians, please don't forget that. This is very important for the US right now. So you don't need to break people. You don't need to do anything. You just bring in technology, you invest. Don't forget, Russia is right next door, which means there are also geopolitical interests. It's the center of Europe, and you just interact with the country. You have this new, am I speaking? You know, I'm always saying that we should try to be an ally of the US, like Israel is in the Middle East. Why shouldn't we become such an enclave, for example, together with Poland and Eastern Europe? Why not take this path? The thing is, we actually don't have much of a choice. We really don't have much of a choice. And in Europe, we won't become rich. In the European Union, I guarantee you, we'll become poorer. No, the government will become richer. Ukraine's budget will increase. It will be about 80 billion euros without the war, while before the war, our total budget was $40 billion. 980, but only bureaucrats, the government apparatus, things like that will be financed from it. But people will become poorer because businesses will have to follow the rules of the European Union, which are impossible to fulfill in general, and especially for a poor country. You know, I recently read a post by a girl, a German woman who lives in America, and her mother owns a small business in Germany. And she says her mother has a small business with a revenue of 200,000 euros a year. I think she said 200,000 euros. Well, a small business calculates half of it goes to taxes right away. 50,000, then there's the employee's salary and taxes for them, something else, electricity, and 25,000 or 30,000 euros in profit. You won't take off under such conditions, and that's in Germany, where there's a market, lending, and purchasing power. Now you're imposing these rules on Ukraine, and that's the end of everything. If you introduce VAT for sole proprietors now, that's the end of everything. Many people don't understand this. It's the last living thing in Ukraine. These 5% from turnover need to be cherished, nurtured, not even laid a finger on or interfered with. And I know a lot about this because I'm deeply involved in artificial intelligence. And you know what I catch myself thinking? I watch your broadcasts. Sometimes guests answer something and I realize they have no idea what will happen tomorrow. Because tomorrow, human labor as we know it, manual and in some cases even intellectual, won't be needed at all. And you'll have to give commands to artificial intelligence and get creative so that more tasks are solved for you. You'll be kind of administering with the help of AI. That's your only choice and way out. And from this point of view, while people argue about things like language or taxes, who will pay taxes if a computer does your job, the computer will be paying taxes, not you. They just don't think like that. And now when you say, let's add VAT, go ahead and add it. What kind of country is this? Are we going to create something from our minds, add value? Or are we just going to dig up the last thing that can be dug, send the last people abroad as guest workers, use them, and send the rest to the front? Tatiana, they don't think. It's superficial. First of all, they don't understand this. And second, they're not interested. They have their own hidden interests, their own pockets, their own privileged position. These are deeply flawed people who are not ready to live with equal rights with you, with me, with anyone else, even with a janitor, excuse me. They want to be special, to live a special life, and of course to have lots and lots of money and control huge budgets, while the rest are as poor as possible, be as poor as possible. When we don't have enough in the budget and the solution is to raise taxes, all of this is nonsense. They're just complete idiots.
The main thing is that military payments depend on this, on our taxes. And here's another piece of news that came out over the weekend, but not many people paid attention to it.
Because of all the hype with Iran and America, the news was about Podolyak.
Kyiv Independent said that Zelensky supposedly gave the green light to strike bases, certain storage sites of Russian weapons on the territory of Belarus, which are going to be launched into Ukraine.
What does this news mean in the context of the peace track?
And there was also news that Belarusian opposition leader Tikhanovskaya wants to visit Ukraine, and she will discuss with Zelensky how they could build friendly relations and help each other in the future.
I'm in contact with some real Belarusian opposition dissidents, and even without them, I understand who Tikhanovskaya is, really. Don't pay attention to her, she's completely empty. It's not just zero, it's 2 zeros. Regarding the most important topic, the first one you mentioned, about the shelling of those depots in Belarus. He said something about Belarus, you noticed that correctly. And that's Zelensky all over. Whenever it gets closer to peace, he absolutely has to either curse out Putin. That's escalation, if we strike Belarus. I'm not saying that Belarus doesn't threaten us. Of course, there's probably some kind of threat there, probably there is, but right now, having these conversations, or especially actually doing it, does that bring us closer to peace or not? Of course not. We might drag Lukashenko into this war and give him a free hand. Maybe he said that, I hope he said that, just to scare Lukashenko so it doesn't come to that. But you can't do that right now. You have to understand why. They say Putin is prepared to wage war for 2 more years. Have you heard that? That claim is everywhere today, just like before when it was said Putin is ready for 2 more years of war. Because he knows very well that if, by some miracle, Ukraine keeps fighting for another year or 2, there will be nothing left of it. And then Putin won't have to do anything anymore. Here, everyone will tear each other apart to the end. They'll kill each other. Then there will be this kind of chaos. Everyone, more or less, people will leave. Pensioners will die off. And then just like they could even launch a second special military operation in about 10 years and finish off what's left. Take the left bank, you see? He understands all of this perfectly well. The KGB monitors all these public quarrels, these threads, these silly girls. They see the whole mood. And over there, no one plans just a week ahead. They plan decades ahead, and they do this modeling, and they understand. The process of self-destruction has begun. So I am speaking out to immediately stop this process. All quarrels among ourselves, all disagreements. To focus on being constructive. And all of this, these are Putin's main helpers. They can beat their chests and call themselves patriots, but they are Putin's main helpers, indirectly.
Thank you. So we often say that Zelensky doesn't make decisions on his own. Do you feel that in these words there is something that peace, there's a scent of peace, so to speak? The Europeans sensed it, the globalists, and that was their message.
Well, I don't agree with you that he doesn't make decisions. He does make decisions, and only he makes them. Another thing is that he always has to look, since he's weak financially, he has nothing, no resources, he's forced to look for allies. And so today he's with the globalists, whether situationally or not, tomorrow with others, and the day after tomorrow with someone else. He looks at which situation is more beneficial for him, who to align with, who to make some internal compromises with, and so on. Agreements? Europe. Well, we all see what's happening with Europe. We all see it perfectly well. Well, to rely on that is just ridiculous. There's a lot of talk. Kaja Kallas, Ursula is speaking there. Kaja Kallas says Putin should be deprived of nuclear weapons. If Ukraine is going to limit its army, then Russia should limit its army too. I'm for it, you're for it, the viewers, everyone watching us is for it. Tell me, how are you, Kaja Kallas, going to limit Putin in this? If Putin says no, what can you do to him? Nothing.
Putin will say,
and since we can't do anything physically, that's what we need to start from today and build our lives so that he can't do anything to us physically. We need a powerful economy, national unity, not the kind Poroshenko had, but real unity based on a national idea. Not this stuff where Zelensky and Poroshenko keep talking about the European Union that will be accepted into the European Union. That's not a national idea, that's nonsense.
I really wish we would focus on our own problems. Leave Trump alone, because Ukrainians have spent the whole weekend talking only about Trump. What he did, what was right, what was wrong. But it's important for us to focus on our own problems and find a way out of this war. Thank you for joining our broadcast today. Please subscribe to Dennis's channel, subscribe to Liberty UA, like the video, and leave your comments. Thank you for your attention. See you next time.
Thank you.